Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte
Attorney for the United States in this matter. With me is Bill Sweeney, Assistant Director in Charge of the New York Field Office of the FBI, and James Robnett, who is the Supervisory Agent in Charge of the New York Office of the IRS. Also with me are the prosecutors from the United States Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York who prosecuted the Cohen matter. I'm going to have a brief statement and will not be taking any questions. Today, as you heard, Michael Cohen pled guilty to 8 felony charges. 5 of those dealt with tax evasion for the years 2012 through 2016, in which he failed to report approximately $4.1 million in reported income. Approximately 2.5 of that money was from interest payments from a personal loan that he failed to report. Approximately $1.3 million of that money was from the operation of his taxi medallion business. Approximately $100,000 of that money was from brokerage commissions, and over $200,000 was from consulting fees. That's over $4.3 million over a 5-year period, which translates into a loss to the United States Treasury of approximately $1.3 million. In addition, in count 6, Mr. Cohen pled guilty to making false statements to a financial institution in connection with an application for a home equity line of credit. In that application, he failed to disclose more than $14 million in debt that he had, and as a result of that concealment, he obtained that $500,000 line of credit, which he would not have been entitled to had he been candid and honest. In addition, Mr. Cohen pled guilty to 2 campaign finance charges, one for causing an unlawful corporate contribution, and a second one for personally making an excessive personal contribution, both for the purpose of influencing the 2016 election. In addition, what he did was he worked to pay money to silence 2 women who had information that he believed would be detrimental to the 2016 campaign and to the candidate and the campaign. In addition, Mr. Cohen sought reimbursement for that money by submitting invoices to the candidate's company, which were untrue and false. They indicated that the reimbursement was for services rendered for the year 2017, when in fact those invoices were a sham. He provided no legal services for the year 2017, and it was simply a means to obtain reimbursement for the unlawful campaign contribution. A couple of points I'd like to make. First, these are very serious charges and reflect a pattern of lies and dishonesty over an extended period of time. They are significant in their own rights. They are particularly significant when done by a lawyer who, through training and tradition, understands what it means to be a lawyer, to engage in honest and fair dealing and adherence to the law. Mr. Cohen disregarded that training, disregarded that tradition and decided that he was above the law, and for that he was going to pay a very, very serious price. With respect to the campaign finance violations, the campaign finance laws are designed to prevent the use of illegal money in elections and to maintain the integrity of those elections. Mr. Cohen made guilty pleas for those campaign violations, and those are core violations. And what he did was these pleas remind us that it is illegal for corporations to make contributions to candidates, and it is illegal to make contributions in excess of the amount that Congress set for individuals. That is a strong message today, and we will not fear of prosecuting additional corporation campaign finance cases. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, this case is unique in many ways. Just witness the gathering of all of you here today. And in other ways, it's unique as well. But in the really important ways, this case is not unlike many cases that my office, the United States Attorney's Office, brings, that the entire Department of Justice brings, and that the law enforcement agencies do as well, including the FBI and the IRS. This case has more in common with all those cases because they all share the same message. And that message is that the rule of law applies, and that for law enforcement, all of whom are gathered here, it is our commitment that we will pursue and vindicate who choose to break the law, and vindicate the majority of people who live law-abiding lives, who follow honest and fair dealing, and live lives of lawful behavior. The message is that we are here. Prosecutors are here, law enforcement is here, the Department of Justice is here, the law enforcement agencies here. We are a nation of laws, and the essence of this case is justice, and that is an equal playing field for all persons in the eyes of the law, and that is a lesson that Mr. Cohen learned today, and it is a very harsh one.
It is Wednesday, the 22nd of August of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid me of this priest? Well. So many convictions, so many charges. Oh, I know Manafort had 10 that were in a mistrial, but he got 8, and he's going up the river for a long time. And his travails are not over. He has another trial. Indeed. Oh, and the big one, Michael Cohen. Oh my God. Trump is in big trouble now, isn't he? Though if you're in Trump land, none of it matters. It's all a hoax. It's all heresy. Everything that you see is not meant to be what you're seeing. It really is something else. And that is, dear leader, our great man that God put here on earth. Yes, I heard this at a Black Bear Diner in Grants Pass, Oregon. And, oh, God, the invectives against Obama. And you know what? Even the spotted owl was brought up. The spotted owl. They're still blaming the spotted owl for everything that's wrong with America. So it doesn't matter. We have to, I think, essentially just cut those people loose. All right? They're going to be spinning around like a erratic top until they topple over when the centrifugal force, dissipates and gravity takes over, as it always does. Yes, brings them back down to earth. But they won't know or care even then. So let's be clear about that. These indictments, these convictions, I swear to God, these people believe it's a hoax. A conspiracy to keep Donald Trump from doing the great work that God intended him to. Oh my God. Yeah. And I fear, folks, I'm seeing it in Trump land. I fear that maybe it'll be brother shooting brother. I can't tell you how many times I heard you liberals are the reason for this problem. You liberals. Yeah. So, we believe in the rule of law. They believe whatever it is they want to believe when they believe it. It doesn't matter. Everything else is heresy. Hearsay, heresy. Yeah, heresy. That's what it was. And I will also say the prosperity gospel proves it all. Though I was looking around the room, and there weren't that many people who were prospering from the prosperity gospel, but they're all grasping for that prosperity gospel brass ring. Maybe God will shine his benevolent light upon them and riches will appear. There's a few that the prosperity gospel works for them. That's right. But I know it personally, if they only lived the blessed life that they purport that is how they live, so that God bestowed the riches upon them, it would make sense. But none of it makes sense. Talk about confirmation bias. Oh, what else is confirmation bias? The findings of reputable universities. Not just a university, but many. That's all heresy. I swear to God. Folks, we're in big trouble, aren't we? And we better gird our loins, so to speak. Well, Michael Cohen's plea to 8 felony counts, served as a warning, as the prosecutor stated up top, that no one is above the law. This is what happens when you think the law doesn't apply to you. And that was my final statement in the Black Bear Diner, was that you can run from the law, but the law will find you. And I also love the fact that all these secessionists and right-wing Christianists who believe in an America that only exists within their fevered white supremacist wet dreams, they were all law and order types back in the day. And now they think that the law, because essentially what, I'll just synthesize it down. The hippies took over, and that ain't law. When they started giving rights to them other people, and they even gave rights to the spotted owl. And now every black person wants to kill every white person. The blacks have said it. You can see it happening all over. The blacks are going to kill the white people. And that is Obama's fault. And the spotted owl, too. We don't have the jobs because of spotted owl. We could have been harvesting some trees, and then we wouldn't have any trees to burn, and then we wouldn't have this terrible smoke. Yes. This is what we're up against. And, well, it doesn't matter. You know, there was an old anti-drug movie I remember seeing in junior high, right up there with Reefer Madness. And it's a guy who's on a hallucinogen. Obviously, it's LSD. And what could happen to you? And this fellow in his stupor on LSD steps out like in a crowded highway or, dark street, whatever. And he stands in front of these speeding cars and puts his hand up like he's going to stop these cars. And, of course, then it cuts to, a crash test dummy getting flattened by a car going about 80 miles an hour. And I have to say, it doesn't matter what you think. The rules of life are going to smash you down dead, and it won't matter what you think. That's where we are. What's on the rest of the menu? Boy, I've gone off. I better stop that. Prisoners nationwide go on strike over poor living conditions and forced labor that includes firefighting. Yeah, pennies a day. A New York judge refuses Trump's effort to dismiss a lawsuit against his company, stating Trump authorized and condoned his security guards to rough up protesters. Yeah, that was when he was on the campaign. And a lawsuit brought by Russian oligarchs against Trump Russia dossier author Christopher Steele has been tossed out by a federal court. After the break, we move to the chef's table where U.S. officials from the Treasury, State, and Homeland Security departments refuse to answer questions about Putin's American assets at a contentious Senate hearing. There were even Republicans saying, "You're not going to tell us what Putin has here? Why?" And a study reveals German towns which had high Facebook use also experienced more far-right violence. Fancy that. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln, who still is in need of funds. So if you could throw some even rubles her way, I'm sure she can figure out how to exchange it. She needs it to be able to upgrade her complete the upgrade on her software and hardware. So any help you can push her way would be greatly appreciated by her and us. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the Netroots Radio contribute donate buttons, and we are unable to do this without you. Thank you for your generosity. The lights are blinking, which means that we're paying our bills. Thank you so much. Do follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Also on Facebook, you can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. Check out the show notes and links diary. I post about 10 minutes before showtime on Daily Codes, where you can find me as Justice Putnam. Follow the show on Facebook and follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. Podcasts of the show can be found by way of Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, Spreaker, YouTube, and wherever fine podcasts can be found. Okay, this first article that we have here at the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, is by E.A. Crunden, out of Think Progress. Incarcerated people across the U.S. are going on strike Tuesday, which was yesterday, went on strike yesterday, kicking off a 3-week protest against poor living conditions and forced labor in what could be one of the largest U.S. prison strikes in U.S. history. For many, the strike comes after several months of battling extreme wildfires in states like California, where incarcerated people are often put involuntarily in dangerous positions for minimal pay during natural disasters. And to add insult to injury, once they've fought many seasons of wildfires, and once they are cycled out, they've served their terms, they can never get a job fighting wildfires for real pay because they have a prison record. Not that the prison record also shows that they were heroes in many cases, fighting wildfires while in prison. They are convict and they get a scarlet letter and don't get to work again, because how else can we keep getting people to commit crimes over and over and over so they can get put back in jail and the prisons get money for that? Beginning this week, at least 17 states will see a halt to labor and in some cases hunger striking in a wide-scale protest organized predominantly by incarcerated people themselves. They will refrain from cooking, cleaning, laundry, and other daily work as part of the effort, in keeping with their demand to an immediate end of prison slavery or work for unequal pay and treatment. Now, of course, some of us remember the old chain gangs, the old work gangs. Prison would press their prisoners into forced labor, say like building a road. And the prison would be able to bring in a bid lower than what a private contractor would, maybe just by a few $1,000s, say. And of course, if your labor as a prison is only being paid pennies a day, if at all, then all that money that you placed on the bid has to go somewhere. Yeah. And I'm sure it's not going back into the prison to make living conditions for the prisoners better. No, that's not how it ever worked. How did it? A number of cities are participating in virtually every region across the country. They include several California cities like Los Angeles, Sacramento, and San Jose. Those strikes come after growing controversy surrounding the role of incarcerated people in fighting wildfires, a practice that criminal justice advocates have long critiqued. And this article unfortunately doesn't state this, but several prisoners have died in these wildfires. You won't see their names on a plaque about their heroic efforts in attempting to stop these fires, because, well, they're wearing a scarlet letter now, aren't they? Brad Reed of Raw Story brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A New York judge shot down an effort by Donald Trump to dismiss a lawsuit against his private security guards for allegedly roughing up demonstrators who were protesting outside of Trump Tower months after he announced his presidential run. Now, I appreciate the journalistic standard of, imposing the alleged aspect, because it hasn't been proven in court yet. But we do have video evidence of, the tall guy. What's his name again? Schlister, something like that. The big goon, his big goon guy, bodyguard guy. He and others roughing the hell up out of, punching him in the head, kicking at him. So, yeah, alleged pleas. Bronx Supreme Court Justice Fernando Tapia. We know what Trump's going to say about that. Declined to dismiss a suit filed by protesters who claim they were roughed up by Trump's security team back in 2015. Specifically, Tapia said that Trump himself authorized and condoned his security guards to rough up the protesters, and he specifically cited Trump's statement that, quote, maybe they deserve to be roughed up, end quote, on the grounds that, quote, it was absolutely disgusting what those protesters were doing. Yeah, protesting Trump, that's disgusting. The lawsuit was filed by 5 Latino activists who claim they were roughed up by longtime Trump bodyguard Keith Schiller. That big old goon. And 2 other men who were employed as part of the then candidate's security personnel. Excuse me. But the receipts are there, called video evidence, and it's not just by one news organization or one person's cell phone video, but by a gaggle of reporters. Offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, is brought to us by Cody Fenwick from Alternet. You know, the hits just keep piling up. The defamation lawsuit against Christopher Steele, the author of the infamous dossier, was dismissed by a federal judge in Washington, D.C. yesterday. Mikhail Friedman, Petra Avin, and Herman Kahn brought the case against Steele, a former British intelligence officer, and his company Orbis Business Intelligence Limited. Let's remember, Herman Kahn, now he's a Russian oligarch, right? I mean, they're all Russian oligarchs, but Herman Kahn is the closest to Putin. And coincidentally, his son-in-law, Vanderswan, I think it's Vanderswan, yes, is currently serving time in jail. Just a coincidence. The three men are Russian oligarchs who said they were defamed by the dossier's claims that they were involved in Russia's efforts to interfere in the 2016 election. They have also filed suit against BuzzFeed for publishing the dossier. Proving defamation in U.S. courts is exceptionally hard, and the judge found that the oligarchs had not met the standard to push the lawsuit forward. They would have to demonstrate that Steele had intentionally promoted information he believed to be incorrect or negligently pushed dubious claims. See, in the court of public opinion, this is what the Giulianis and Trump himself have been attempting to achieve. Unfortunately, like I said, the rules of life have a brutal way of just smashing you flat into the ground, no matter what you think. Plaintiffs do not offer evidence that Mr. Steele in fact had subjective doubts or recklessly disregarded information about its falsity, or that defendants had obvious reason to doubt the source described in CIR 112, that's the documents, of course, as a trusted compatriot of a top-level Russian government official, the judge wrote. Well, the proverbial S is hitting the fan now, isn't it? And splatter's going everywhere. And a lot of people are going to be, stained. Let's get to our break. We better. And when we come back, of course, we will go through weather from around the world. And we're going to finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Annie Sneed. Every spring, a bird called the barnacle goose migrates from the North Sea coast to the Russian Arctic, where it breeds. That's a 3,000-kilometer trip. Along the way, the geese usually take pit stops to rest and refuel. But the Arctic spring has been arriving earlier and earlier. So researchers analyzed 6 years of barnacle goose migratory tracking data to try to figure out if these geese, and other species like it, can adapt their migration to stay in sync with the changing seasons.
And then we used satellite images to see when snow was melting in the Arctic And then we could relate the timing of the birds to the snow melt.
Bart Nolet, an ecologist at the University of Amsterdam. Nolet and his colleagues found that the geese did not leave their wintering grounds sooner to match the earlier Arctic spring, but they did speed up their trip by skipping many of their usual stopovers. The birds arrived in the Arctic up to 13 days earlier than they used to, but at a cost.
So in a normal year, they start laying their eggs right after arrival. But now they spent more than a week foraging before they were laying their eggs. So in effect, they weren't that earlier than could have been the case if they would have been able to lay their eggs immediately. And as a result, the chicks that hatched from the eggs in that early year, they survived much less than normally. Probably because they missed the food peak, which is actually a combination of very high quality in the grass and enough grass around. And that food peak is around 3 weeks after snowmelt. But now they were a few weeks later.
With devastating effects.
We looked at the daily survival of the goslings. So if you calculate it over the whole month, then it's a quite dramatic decrease from 20% to only 2% surviving. Yeah, so it basically means that not many goslings are surviving in such a year.
The study's in the journal Current Biology. So why don't the geese just leave their wintering grounds earlier?
When it's an early spring in the Arctic, it's not necessarily an early spring in the wintering area. So the birds cannot use any cue that's related to whether it's early or late spring to leave.
But Nolet does think there's some hope they might be able to adapt.
We know that the goslings learn their migration from their parents. So there is a lot of learned behavior in it. So it may well be that in the course of time some birds discover that they have to depart earlier from the wintering areas to be able to time their migration perfectly again and match it with the Arctic.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Annie Sneed.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Hey kids and parents, it's back to school time. As you shop for school supplies and get ready for class, make sure you have emergency plans in place. Did you know that emergency preparedness plays a major role in school life? Throughout the year, schools actively prepare for natural disasters, outbreaks, and other emergency situations. Students and parents need to be aware and learn what to do during an emergency. Every family should build an emergency kit, make a family disaster plan, and be informed about events that could affect their community. Parents, take a few extra steps to help children be prepared. Make sure they know the full name, address, and phone numbers of parents or guardians. In our high-tech world of cell phones, memorizing emergency phone numbers is very important. Include a copy of this information in their backpack. Other items to keep in their backpack include water and non-perishable snacks, a pocket-sized first aid kit, a whistle to alert others for help, and a list of allergies, medical conditions, and medications. Make sure their school and teacher have a copy, too. Be familiar with different routes and ways to travel home, like walking, taking the bus, or riding home with another student who lives nearby. Establish a secret code word with your child and whoever takes them home from school to protect against an unauthorized person picking them up. This list is a great starting point to prepare your student for the upcoming school year. Customize these steps to fit your child's capabilities and needs. Ask school administrators and teachers about emergency preparedness plans so you know what steps they are taking to keep your child safe. Many schools have guidelines on how to shelter in place during natural disasters, how to secure classrooms during an emergency lockdown, and how to teach preparedness curriculum to students. Remember, emergency preparedness is important for everyone. Children who are prepared are more confident during stressful emergency situations. By following preparedness guidelines, parents, children, and school staff can improve their safety and peace of mind. For more information on school emergency preparedness, visit cdc.gov/children/schools. To learn more about disasters and emergency preparedness, follow @CDC Emergency on Twitter or visit emergency.cdc.gov. So, let's get prepared. Have a great school year.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. The American colonists were not the first people on the North American continent. Native Americans had lived on the continent for at least 24,000 years. The eastern woodland tribes lived along the eastern seacoast, where the British colonists settled. These included the Iroquois League, which is made up of 5 tribes that lived in what today is the state of New York. These well-organized tribes maintained political ties among themselves so that they could discuss common problems. They lived by hunting and gathering, and by tending small crops such as beans, corn, and squash, which the Iroquois called the Three Sisters. When planted together, these 3 crops produce more than if planted alone. However, there were many negative effects from Native Americans' contact with colonists. Native Americans suffered from the encroachment of colonial settlements, disease, and warfare, leading to a drastic decline in the native population. In fact, by the end of the Revolutionary War, there were relatively few Native Americans living along the Atlantic coast. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Tuesday afternoon was a busy one in Trumpland. The jury in the Paul Manafort case returned a guilty verdict on 8 of the 18 charges. NBC's Ken Delanian has the story.
Paul Manafort showed no reaction. He was stone-faced. Nor did his wife after the verdict. Prosecutors shook hands with one another, and the judge admonished the jury that they did not have to talk to the press in the wake of this verdict. But look, prosecutors got a little of everything here. Not 100% victory, obviously, for the prosecution, but they got 5 counts of tax fraud. They got 1 count of failing to file a foreign bank account report and 2 counts of bank fraud. And it appeared that this jury meticulously went through the details of the evidence, and they appear to have latched onto 2 of the stronger bank fraud charges where there are documentable lies introduced into evidence. In one case, Paul Manafort doctored a profit and loss statement to defraud a bank to get loans at a time where he was badly in need of cash. So this jury was super thoughtful, it appears, about their deliberations. And earlier today, they told the judge that they were unable to reach consensus on, it turns out, a number of counts. The judge asked them to go back and deliberate. They tried for about 4 hours, were unable to do it. And so the judge declared a mistrial on the 10 counts. Now, the government can retry Paul Manafort on those 10 counts, but he's facing a lot of years in prison already on the 8 counts that he's been convicted of, and he's facing another trial in Washington, D.C. next month that carries even more prison time.
Another bombshell was unfolding at the same time on Tuesday as Donald Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, pleaded guilty to illegally interfering in the 2016 election and implicated the president. Cohen said he worked, quote, at the direction of a candidate for federal office for the purpose of influencing the election. Pleading guilty to 5 counts of tax evasion, 2 counts related to an illegal campaign contribution, and 1 count of making a false statement. MSNBC's Ali Velshi explains.
Trump's longtime personal lawyer and fixer, Michael Cohen, pleading guilty to 8 counts, including 2 criminal campaign finance violations he said occurred, quote, at the direction of the candidate, end quote. Cohen did not name the candidate in court, but the meaning appears clear. Cohen detailing a payment of $150,000 to a woman whose silence he wanted to secure. Those details match what's publicly reported about a payoff to Karen McDougal. Cohen saying it was done, quote, for the principal purpose of influencing the election. Cohen also pleading guilty to making an excessive campaign contribution. That's related to the payment of $130,000 made to a woman in October of 2016, just weeks before the election, at the direction of the same candidate. Those details match what we know about the Stormy Daniels payment.
Cohen's attorney, Lanny Davis, made the TV rounds Tuesday night and Wednesday morning, explaining that Michael Cohen was now ready to tell all.
I can tell you that Mr. Cohen has knowledge on certain subjects that should be of interest to the special counsel and is more than happy to tell the special counsel all that he knows, not just about the obvious possibility of a conspiracy to collude and corrupt the American democracy system in the 2016 election, which the Trump Tower meeting was all about, but also knowledge about the computer crime of hacking and whether or not Mr. Trump knew ahead of time about that crime and even cheered it on. And we know he publicly cheered it on, but did he also have private information? One thing to say about Michael Cohen, if I might, is that he's been through a very tough day. His wife and his 2 children and his family are, I would say, suffering from this type of event, and so is Michael. But in one very important respect, Michael is relieved. He's a good man with a good heart that I've discovered. But he's relieved and liberated is the word I would say to your audience, because now he has no shadow hanging over him. The uncertainty is gone. He has stepped up to the line, and he has admitted what he did wrong, but he is now liberated to tell the truth, everything about Donald Trump that he knows, that led him to approach someone like me, who he knows politically doesn't share anything with President Trump. And from this point on, you're going to see liberated Michael Cohen speaking truth to power.
CNN's Jeffrey Toobin explains just how serious this is for the president.
Michael Cohen implicated Donald Trump in a federal crime. He said that his violation of campaign finance laws was in coordination with and at the direction of Donald Trump. That means that according to this guilty plea, Donald Trump was a co-conspirator and or an aider and abettor of this crime.
But wait, there's more. Just last week, Chris Collins, the first congressman to publicly back Trump, was indicted for insider trading. On Tuesday, the second member of Congress to throw his support behind Trump, Duncan Hunter, along with his wife, was indicted on charges of filing false campaign finance records. In case you were wondering, the third member of Congress to jump on the Trump bandwagon was then Senator Jeff Sessions. And that's a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener funded, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. Life in the southern Indian city of Kerala is struggling to return to normal after monsoon rain sparked once-in-a-century flooding that claimed more than 300 lives. Thousands are still stranded by floodwaters. Tens of thousands of homes are believed destroyed, and at one point over the weekend, 800,000 people have been displaced within city limits.
Kerala in general receives a lot of precipitation.
Mona Lisa Chatterjee is a lecturer in environmental studies at the University of Southern California and says Kerala's 35 million residents, particularly its poor, are used to seasonal rains. But when the monsoon stagnated over the city instead of moving elsewhere, there was little anyone could do.
If you go into the literature of, how environmental consequences are experienced and who experiences them mostly, it's mostly the low-income, people who are impoverished, people who don't have any access to decision makers or do not have the resources to respond to these events. They've always been left out, and I'm not surprised to see this happening.
As rescue efforts wind down, finger-pointing has begun over how city officials could have responded differently. For one, while all of Kerala's 80 dams were overrun by rain, most weren't opened until they'd reached capacity, meaning downstream settlements were deluged with little warning. Chatterjee is glad policymakers and citizens are now wrestling with tough questions over how to brace for increasingly intense floods in the future. But had Kerala's wealthy not been affected by this year's rains, she's unsure that reckoning would have occurred.
It's just that because this event has sort of crossed a threshold and has started to impact a broader sort of community, that we start seeing that this is becoming more visible now, and people are talking about it as a disaster now, because these people have been dealing with this disaster every year anyways.
As recent U.S. surveys back up, climate change rarely seems urgent, until it's staring you in the face. Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Oh, I should mention, I meant to mention at the top, but with all the news that's happening, as it's happening, it slipped my mind. I'd made a little bit of mention of, at least on social media, about some of my physical ailments, and I actually dragged myself to the doctors yesterday. I've been... of course, I'm going to have a knee replacement on one knee and then another knee replacement on another knee. And, of course, when knees start to go, it's probably caused from other problems. And I've had an ankle problem way back, even, probably around my playing days, which was college. And, just exacerbated the problem over the years, doing various jobs and playing too. Like I've mentioned, it's probably a stupid idea to do a backflip off a 10-foot rock face, just for fun. Don't do it. And years of just wear and tear has done its damage, and my ankle was flared up hot. It was on fire. It hurt. It hurt really bad. And I'm used to being, dealing with this stuff. You just manage it. And all of my tricks didn't work. And so I figured, well, I know what it is because I got it in my knees. And I went in and had the x-rays. And the doctor came back and said, yeah, it is a shipwreck in there. Isn't that a nice description? Yeah, there's pieces of the ship all over the place. It's just scattering the seafloor. Yeah, so, of course, an ankle is, quite a small space, like a wrist. So you can't even really, you need a surgeon to give you a cortisone shot adequately. And even then, you might hit a nerve and then you're done. So that's a bit of a concern. So I see the orthopedic surgeon in a week or so. They're backed up. Because there's a lot of people, at least my age, who, let's put it this way. The machine is wearing down. And we're only cogs, and will be replaced by newer and better machines real soon. Such is life. I told you the rules of life will smash you flat in the ground no matter what you think. Let's get on with the weather from around the world, and we always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh, nice and cool. We will be going to mid-90s, which is nearly the same temperature as we had yesterday. Right now it's partly cloudy and nicely cool, as I mentioned. Winds are a negligible 1 mile per hour out of the southwest. We'll be picking up later out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then tonight we'll then shift again out of the northwest, but continuing at its usual clip of 5 to 10 miles per hour. Oh, one other little tidbit of information here on the west coast of the continental United States of America. Around 3 o'clock, 3:30 local time, we did have a 6.8 earthquake off of Bandon, Oregon, about 12 miles. I have not seen the depth, but they did say no tsunami warning, so maybe it was rather deep. But inexplicably, the grandfather clock that I have here at the mothership in along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, it was off by 1:27 this morning, and I was marveling with friends and family alike about how accurate that grandfather clock was. I set it. I was able to set it pretty darn close to the second, and it had maintained that for weeks and weeks and weeks, months. And it took me a little bit to get it to that point, but man, it was just holding the time. So inexplicably, I lost 1 minute 27 seconds last night. I couldn't figure it out. Maybe the jostling of the earth had something to do with throwing it askew, because you don't want to tip your grandfather clock on any angle or point. It'll throw the pendulum off. Interesting, isn't it? Well, tomorrow we look to actually be a bit chillier at 90 degrees. Oh, that'll be actually quite nice. Grass pollen is low. The air quality index right now isn't too bad. It's in the high end of moderate, but will be going up to the unhealthy part, just right from moderate, right into unhealthy. And they are expecting 170 parts per million. On the air quality index, the daytime UV index is high at 7, which is put on some sunscreen. High pressure is holding steady at 29.89 inches, though that trough is moving in, and it looks like it could weaken this high pressure, and we might have some kind of rain. East of us, we've had some thunder and lightning. Of course, if there's not enough rain, lightning will start forest fires, and hopefully it just hits the spots that have already burned. Relative humidity is at 64%, and it could go a little bit higher. It's been muggy, indeed. All right, weather from around the world is brought to you by People's Personal Weather Stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 71 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 85 degrees and sunny. Rome is 88 degrees and fair, though they do have a heat warning, because once they get to be about 90, 91, that's when things start clicking off there. Kiev is 74 and fair. Kabul is 85 and fair. No wedding parties, please. When the weather is fair, the drones fly. Please, people, think of your happiness in this life, please. Okay. Hong Kong is 77 degrees with a rain shower. Tokyo is 82 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 49 and fair. San Francisco, California is 59 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And New York, New York is 77 degrees Fahrenheit and mostly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by People's Personal Weather Stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Okay, first offering here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, is by Casey Michelle out of Think Progress, who wants to know, why won't U.S. officials answer questions about Putin's American assets? Why? It's just another one of those coincidences, is it not? Does Russian President Vladimir Putin own any assets, companies, property, or investments in the United States? That was the big question featured in yesterday's Senate Banking Committee hearing, and one that could have major implications on U.S. leverage over Russia moving forward. But the witnesses in the hearing avoided answering questions about Putin's potential American assets time and again. The hearing, which featured officials from the Treasury, State, and Homeland Security departments, was nominally dedicated to discussing U.S. sanctions policy against Russia. Few details, however, were shared in the hearing, to the obvious frustration to the senators presiding. Instead, the most notable takeaway was something unexpected: whether or not Putin personally owned assets in the U.S., and if so, why those assets had not yet been targeted by American officials as part of the sanctions regime against Moscow. Why? Why won't they admit that he has assets? Well, because Putin sets up shell companies to hide his ownership. He's done this time and again with, well, members in his own family, a brother-in-law, a son-in-law, not a son-in-law, but a brother-in-law and some other member in his family. He's done this. And what are shell companies? Well, they're a way of hiding ownership and assets. Are they not? So it begs the question, doesn't it? Who might be the proxy? Where might the properties, say, that might be owned by, say, a friend or a family member of Putin? How about a friend by the name of Donald J. Trump? Unfortunately, that question was never asked, at least in open session.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Luke Barnes of Think Progress brings us this last offering at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. When Cambridge Analytica story broke in March, most of the attention was focused on how the firm used Facebook data to micro-target U.S. voters in swing states during the 2016 presidential election. Soon, there were also reports that Cambridge Analytica used Facebook to exploit socioeconomic tensions and ethnic divisions in places like Nigeria and Kenya ahead of their elections. Now, though, a new study has suggested that the damage Facebook's influence can have more extensive than previously thought, even without the help of firms like Cambridge Analytica. The study, carried out by researchers at the University of Warwick, examined more than 3,300 anti-refugee attacks in Germany over the last 2 years. It consistently found that in areas with higher use of Facebook, there were more attacks on refugees. If Facebook usage per person in an area was more than one standard deviation above the national average, attacks on refugees increased by 50%. This correlation held regardless of the town size, economic standing, or political leanings. We show that right-wing anti-refugee sentiment on Facebook predicts violent crimes against refugees and otherwise similar municipalities with higher social media usage. The study's abstract reads, our results suggest that social media can act as a propagation mechanism between online hate speech and real-life violent crime. The study is careful to emphasize that it does not believe that social media itself is a driver of crime. Rather, it argues that Facebook itself serves as gasoline for ingrained prejudices which are only likely to increase as Facebook's algorithm encourages you to like or check out more anti-refugee pages once you've initially liked one. That brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, and we better get out of here. Time's a-flying once again. Do stay tuned to Netroots Radio for all that breaking news. We will visit you tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Yes. And so, breaking news as it happens, and you'll find out if you continue listening to Netroots Radio for the rest of the day, and we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Cohen. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.